Hello, my dear friends. Before you even open your eyes, the first thing you register is the damp, biting cold that has seeped through the thin walls of your small room. You are not a lord in a manor house, nor a lady of leisure. You are a worker, and the pre-dawn chill is your unrelenting alarm clock. This is Victorian London, a city of dazzling progress and deep, dark shadows, and for the next couple of hours, you are going to live within it. The odds of you actually surviving the real thing, with its rampant disease and crushing poverty, were, let's just say, not fantastic. But from the cozy safety of your bed, you can experience its secrets without the unpleasantness of, well, dying from cholera. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's your quiet support that allows me to keep unearthing these forgotten corners of history for you. Now, pull your blankets up a little higher. Imagine the faint, distant clatter of iron-shod hooves on cobblestones and the smell of coal smoke already beginning to stain the air. Settle in. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you do, after splashing some frigid water on your face from a basin, is reach for your uniform. To the world outside, this uniform is a magnificent thing. It's a beacon of crimson and royal blue, a splash of regal authority against the city's drab grey and brown. When a child sees you on the street, they see the General Post Office, they see the Queen herself, in a way. They see a walking, breathing symbol of connection in an ever-expanding world. The postman is a figure of immense trust. You are the bearer of good news and bad, of business proposals and lovers' vows, of money sent home from a son overseas. Your scarlet coat, they imagine, must be tailored to perfection, with its shining brass buttons, each embossed with the royal crown. It speaks of discipline, of reliability, of the unstoppable march of the British Empire, delivering its messages to the furthest corners of the globe. In the public imagination, you are swift, clean, and efficient, a clockwork man in a clockwork system. You are the human face of progress, and your uniform is your proud, unblemished standard. But you, my friend, know the secret. You know the reality that lurks beneath the illusion. As your hands close around the fabric, you don't feel crisp, tailored wool. You feel a thick, heavy, unyielding coarseness. The scarlet coat weighs a ton, or so it feels on your tired shoulders first thing in the morning. It was made for durability, not for comfort. The texture is more like a horse blanket than a piece of fine clothing. It's stiff, and it chafes. It chafes at your neck, under your arms, and at your wrists, leaving your skin perpetually red and raw in those places. And then, there is the smell. The public sees the brilliant red, but you smell the reality. It's a pungent, musty aroma of damp wool that never, ever, truly dries out, especially during the long, wet London winters. Woven into that dampness is the faint but unmistakable scent of your own old sweat from yesterday's 20-mile walk, and the day before that, and the day before that. It carries the ghostly hint of coal smoke from the air, the dust of the sorting office, and perhaps the faint, sour smell of the cheap beer you had before collapsing into bed last night. You pull on the heavy wool trousers, which are just as unforgiving. They are baggy in some places and strangely tight in others, designed with a one-size-fits-all mentality that truly fits no one. As you do up the buttons, you might feel a familiar little prickle, a tiny moving thing that suggests you are not the only living creature calling this uniform home. Fleas are a simple fact of life, and this dense, warm, and often damp wool is a perfect breeding ground for them. You do your best to ignore it. The rules of the General Post Office are incredibly strict. Your uniform must be worn at all times while on duty. It must be complete. The brass buttons must be polished, no matter how much the coat itself smells like a wet dog. To be seen in a state of disarray is to disrespect the crown, and that is an offence that could cost you your job, a job that is one of the very few things standing between you and utter destitution. So why? Why this punishing, uncomfortable, frankly unhygienic suit of armour? Because you are not just delivering letters. You are a soldier in a civilian army. The post office is an essential arm of the state, as vital to the running of the empire as the Royal Navy. Your uniform is a deliberate echo of a military uniform for that very reason. The vibrant scarlet and deep blue are not just for show, they are colours that command respect and project authority. In an era when mail theft was a serious and common crime, your uniform was your first line of defence. It made you an obvious and official presence, a difficult target for the common footpad or thief. It told the world that you were not just a man carrying a bag, you were an agent of the government, protected by its full might. The weight, the coarseness, the sheer impracticality for the person wearing it, all of that was secondary to the powerful message it sent to everyone who saw it. Your personal comfort was a small, insignificant price to pay for the security and symbolism of the Royal Mail. You shrug your shoulders, settling the immense weight of the coat. The collar scratches at your neck. You take your polished leather satchel, its strap already worn smooth from use, and sling it over your shoulder. The leather creaks, and the heavy buckle digs into your chest. For a moment, you stand in the gloom of your room, a splash of official cholera in a world of grey. You are now the property of the General Post Office. The man disappears, and the postman takes his place. The day hasn't even truly begun, but you are already feeling the familiar, weary burden of it all, a weight that settles not just on your shoulders, but deep in your bones, as you prepare to take your first steps out into the waking city. And inside that heavy leather bag rests the very reason for your existence, a universe of folded paper and inky secrets. You step out into the street, the cold air hitting you like a physical blow. The city is still waking, shrouded in a grey, misty twilight. But you are not headed out on your route just yet. Your first destination is the district sorting office, the beating heart of your small corner of the postal world. In your satchel and in the great sacks you are about to confront lies the very soul of the Victorian age, captured on paper. In the mind of a novelist, or a poet, the letter is a sacred object. It's a whisper of love written on delicate, cream-laid paper, perhaps scented with a hint of lavender or rose. It is the urgent, black-slashed script of a businessman closing a deal, or the looping, careful cursive of a mother writing to her son at sea. The public imagines each letter as a unique, precious thing, a vessel for a single, important story. They picture you, the postman, as a careful curator of these paper-thin emotions, handling each one with a gentle reverence, as if it were a fragile butterfly's wing. A letter is a piece of a person, a tangible link across miles of separation. It's an object of intense privacy and immense emotional value, sealed with a kiss or a prayer. But as you push open the heavy doors to the office, that romantic illusion evaporates in a wave of overwhelming sensory data. The reality is not a curated library of emotions, it is a factory floor for words. The first thing you notice is the feel. You plunge your hands into a vast canvas bin, filled to the brim with letters, and the sensation is not of delicate, perfumed paper. It's a dry, rustling, dusty blizzard. You feel the sharp corners and the stiff, cheap paper that makes up the vast majority of the mail. You get an instant paper cut, a thin, stinging line across your knuckle. You barely even register it. You'll have a dozen more by the end of your shift. And then there is the ink. The cheap, industrial-grade ink used for the vast majority of these letters and for the all-important postmarks never seems to fully dry. A fine, black and blue dust hangs in the air, but the real grime comes from direct contact. Within minutes, your hands are no longer your own. They are stained a bruised, purplish black. The ink works its way deep into the grain of your skin, nestling permanently under your fingernails, filling every line on your palms and knuckles. No amount of scrubbing with harsh lye soap at the end of the day will ever truly remove it. It becomes a part of you, the indelible tattoo of your profession. The smell, too, is a far cry from lavender. It's the sharp, metallic, and slightly sour smell of that cheap ink, mingled with the musty, pulpy scent of low-grade paper, and underneath it all are the ghostly scents of the 1,000 homes these letters have come from. A wave of stale tobacco, the faint aroma of fried onions, the cloying sweetness of cheap perfume, and if you're unlucky, the damp, mildewed smell of a letter that has travelled a long way in a leaky mailbag. You learn to read the smells. You know the particular scent of a letter from a tannery district, or the fishy tang of one from the docks. And sometimes you handle a letter that feels slightly greasy to the touch, or one that carries a faint, medicinal odour. You try not to think about the fact that the sender of this very letter might have been in the throes of scarlet fever, or that the paper might have been resting on a bedside table next to a victim of consumption. You try not to think about the common practice of licking the envelope flap to seal it, and what invisible traces that might leave behind. You just sort. Why this stark, grimy contrast? The answer is progress, on a scale that is hard to comprehend. The introduction of the penny post in 1840 was a revolution. Before then, postage was expensive, paid by the recipient, and far beyond the means of the average person. But now, for a single penny stamp, a letter could travel anywhere in the country. This Act of Parliament didn't just make the post cheaper. It unleashed a torrent of paper. The volume of mail exploded by a factor of 10, then 20, then 100. What was once a trickle became a flood, an avalanche that threatened to bury the post office. The only way to cope was to industrialize. The letter ceased to be a sacred object and became a unit of production. The system couldn't afford reverence. It demanded speed. The post office had to develop a factory-like efficiency, processing millions of items a day. You and your ink-stained hands are the human cogs in that machine. Your physical discomfort, the paper cuts that sting with ink, the permanent grime under your nails, it's all part of the hidden cost of connecting an entire nation and an empire. Your dirty hands are the price paid for the clean, seamless communication that the public now takes for granted. You are the invisible, smudged intermediary between the sender's heart and the recipient's hand. You lift another armful of letters. The sheer weight of them is surprising. They feel less like a collection of messages and more like a load of raw material. Your focus narrows. You are no longer thinking about the stories they might contain. You are looking at postcodes, at street names, at the scribbled, barely legible addresses. Your eyes, like your hands, become tools, scanning and sorting with a mechanical rhythm. The individual letter, with all its imagined romance, has vanished. There is only the pile, the unending stream of paper that must be conquered before the sun is fully up. Your stained fingers fly, flicking, sorting, and stacking, driven by the relentless ticking of the clock in a hall that is already beginning to fill with a deafening roar. That rhythmic sorting with your ink-stained hands is happening in a vacuum of your own concentration, but as you pause for a half-second to stretch a cramping finger, the full reality of the room crashes down upon you. The sound you noticed beginning to build earlier is now a physical force, a deafening, relentless roar that fills every corner of the vast, high-ceilinged hall. This is the great sorting office, the engine room of the city's communication. To the respectable citizen who might read about it in an illustrated newspaper, this place is a marvel of modern organization. They picture long, orderly desks, like a university library, where scholarly-looking men sit in quiet contemplation, deciphering addresses with thoughtful precision. The only imagined sound is the gentle rustle of paper and the satisfying, firm thud of a rubber stamp. It is a temple of quiet efficiency, a testament to the civilizing influence of the postal service. The reality, you know, is bedlam. It is an industrial thresher for paper, and you are standing in the middle of it. The sound is not a rustle, it is a constant, grinding, percussive assault. It starts with the sound of the mail sacks, hoisted and then appended onto massive, long tables. It's not a gentle cascade, it's a dry waterfall of paper, a sound like 1,000 decks of cards being shuffled at once. This roar is the foundation, the baseline noise of the room. Layered on top of that is the frantic, sharp, and maddeningly rhythmic sound of the hand stamps. There are hundreds of you in this room, and at the stamping tables, men are pounding postmarks onto letters with a speed that blurs the hand. It is not a gentle thud. It is a hard, fast thwack 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 thwack, a sound that becomes the frantic heartbeat of the office. It's a sound that you will hear in your dreams, a rhythm that will twitch in your wrist even when you're trying to sleep. Then there are the human sounds. Not quiet murmurs, but shouts. 4 men bellowing orders that can barely be heard over the din. Men yelling to one another for more sacks, for a new ink pad, for help with a particularly heavy bin. And beneath it all, the constant, low rumble of heavy iron-wheeled carts being dragged across the stone floor, their wheels groaning and screeching as they are loaded with sorted mail and hauled away to the next station. The combination is a unique kind of industrial symphony, a cacophony that vibrates in your teeth and settles deep in your chest. And you can taste the air. It's thick and heavy, a visible fog made not of London's weather, but of the office itself. It's a swirling miasma of dust. Tiny paper fibres, sheared off the edges of millions of letters, hang in the air, catching the dim, yellow light of the gas lamps that hiss from high above. This paper dust is mixed with fine particles of dried ink, the blue and black grime that you saw stain your hands now aerosolized for you to breathe in. It coats the back of your throat, giving you a perpetual low-grade cough. It gets in your eyes, making them red and itchy. At the end of the day, you will blow your nose and the handkerchief will come away black. This is the source of the infamous postman's sore throat, a constant, rasping affliction that is as much a part of your uniform as your scarlet coat. You are crammed in here, shoulder to shoulder with other men, a river of bodies flowing around the great islands of the sorting tables. The process is frantic. First comes facing, where you must grab armfuls of the jumbled letters and turn them all so they face the same direction, with the stamp in the upper right-hand corner. Your fingers develop a unique, flicking motion, a muscle memory that you never asked for, as you orient letter after letter. Then they are moved to the stampers, who apply the postmark with that brutal, pounding rhythm. After that, they come to tables like yours, the primary sort, where you separate them by district, then by street, in a dizzying display of memorized geography. There is no time for thought. No room for error. The mail must move. So why this frantic, deafening, dust-choked chaos? Why not the quiet, dignified library the public imagines? Because the volume is a monster that must be fed. The penny post, that great democratic invention, created a beast of unimaginable appetite. The post office was never built for this. It was forced to adapt, to turn its offices into factories overnight. They crammed as many men as physically possible into every available space, running them in shifts around the clock. Ventilation, lighting, basic sanitation, these were luxuries the system could not afford. The priority was not the health of the worker, but the speed of the mail. This chaotic, roaring machine was, in the eyes of its architects, a resounding success. They measured success in tons of letters processed per hour, in the speed with which a letter could get from London to Edinburgh. The fact that the human cogs in this machine were deafened, choked with dust, and exhausted to the point of collapse was simply the unfortunate but necessary cost of progress. They saw a beautiful, efficient machine. You experience a brutal, soul-crushing environment. A foreman shouts an order you can't quite hear, but you understand from his frantic gesturing. Your section is done. The cart is here to take your sorted bags away. The immense pressure of the clock ticking down to the departure of the mail coaches and trains dictates every move you make. You help heave the heavy canvas sacks, full of their paper secrets, onto the groaning iron cart. For a moment, you are free from your station, moving through the roaring hall toward the loading bay. The roar of the stamping tables begins to recede behind you, only to be replaced by the cold draft from an open door and the sounds of the world outside, where the next, and perhaps even more dangerous part of the letter's journey is about to begin. You follow the heavy cart out of the roaring hall and into the pre-dawn chill of the coaching yard. For a moment, the air feels blessedly clean, even with the ever-present scent of coal smoke. It's a shock to your dust-filled lungs. The yard is a scene of controlled chaos. Lanterns swing, casting long, dancing shadows. Grooms led magnificent horses, their breath pluming like smoke in the cold air. The animals are powerful, their muscles bunching and releasing under sleek coats. And there, in the center of it all, stands the mail coach. In the public's imagination, and certainly in every popular print of the era, the mail coach is a thing of thrilling beauty. It is an icon of speed and adventure. They picture it careening down a moonlit country lane, its lamps cutting a golden path through the darkness. Its official black and post office red livery is as famous as your own uniform. On its side is the royal cipher, a stamp of untouchable authority. They imagine the buzzing call of the guard's post horn, a clear, brassy fanfare that announces its coming and demands that all lesser traffic give way. The mail coach is not just a vehicle, it is a promise. It is the physical embodiment of the nation's pulse, a noble vessel speeding across the landscape, binding the kingdom together with threads of paper. It is elegance, it is power, it is the romance of the open road. You, however, know it not as a romantic symbol, but as an instrument of torture. Your job on this leg of the journey is not as a sorter, but as a mail guard. You climb up to your designated seat, not in the relative comfort of the passenger compartment, but on a small, exposed perch at the very back of the coach. There is a thin leather cushion on the wooden board, a token gesture that does more to mock the idea of comfort than to provide it. As you settle in, the coach gives a violent lurch, and the journey begins. The glorious image shatters instantly. The sensation is not one of gliding. It is one of perpetual, violent assault. The coach's suspension consists of leather straps, a technology that has barely advanced in 100 years. The result is that every single lump, stone, and rut in the road is transmitted directly and brutally up through the wooden frame and into your skeleton. You are not riding, you are being shaken. It's a bone-jarring, teeth-rattling, organ-jumbling ordeal. The coach sways and pitches with a life of its own. On the cobbled streets of London, the noise is deafening, a thunderous clatter of iron-rimmed wheels on stone, mixed with the groaning and creaking of the coach wooden body as it flexes under the strain. You have to brace yourself constantly, your muscles clenched against the next inevitable jolt that threatens to send you flying off your perch. Once you are out of the city and onto the turnpikes, the experience changes, but does not improve. The roads are often little more than compacted dirt and gravel, softened by rain into a muddy mess and frozen in winter into treacherous, iron-hard ridges. The coach slumps into deep ruts with a sickening lurch that throws you against the side rail. It hits potholes with a crash that feels as though the axle has snapped. And you are completely exposed. The wind whips at you, a relentless, cutting force that seems to find every gap in your heavy uniform. When it rains, you are soaked through in minutes, the cold water trickling down your neck and pooling on your wooden seat. In the winter, sleet and snow sting your face, and the dampness in your clothes freezes, turning your uniform into a suit of icy armor. You learn to live in a state of perpetual, damp, aching cold. The danger is real and constant. A horse could stumble. A wheel could work its way loose on its axle. A sudden swerve to avoid an obstacle could send the entire top-heavy vehicle tipping into a ditch. Being a mail coach guard is one of the most dangerous jobs in the postal service. Highwaymen are the stuff of legend, and while the threat has diminished, it hasn't vanished entirely. Your blunderbuss and pistols are not for show. But the more common enemy is simple physics. The grim reality is that you are far more likely to be killed or maimed by being thrown from your seat during a routine journey than you are by a masked robber. So why this hellish, brutal ride? Why not build stronger, more comfortable coaches? The answer, as always, is the mail itself. The General Post Office ran its mail coach services on ruthlessly strict timetables. Contracts were awarded to private companies, but with immense financial penalties for every minute they were late. Speed was the only god they served. A mail coach averaged a blistering 10 miles per hour, including stops to change horses. To maintain this pace, the coaches had to be driven relentlessly. The drivers pushed their teams of horses to the absolute limit. The coaches were built as light as possible to maximize speed, sacrificing sturdiness and stability. Your comfort, your safety, your very life was a distant secondary concern to the punctual arrival of Her Majesty's mail. That beautiful red and black symbol of national pride was, in reality, a lightweight, fragile and dangerous machine designed for one purpose only, to race the clock, no matter the cost to the men or the animals who served it. As you cling to your seat, spine aching, drenched and freezing, you look out over the dark, rolling fields. The coach is a tiny, fragile speck of order in a vast, chaotic world. You are its guardian, but you are also its prisoner. But even as you endure this older form of torment, you can see the future beginning to encroach. Ahead, a plume of white and grey smoke rises against the dark sky, a signal of a new kind of power, a new kind of speed. The age of the horse is ending, and the age of steam is dawning, promising to carry the mail faster than ever before. You don't know it yet, but that new world will bring with it its own unique forms of grime and misery. The bone-jarring journey of the coach eventually ends, not at a final destination, but at a bustling, noisy railway station. Here, the mail sacks are transferred from the old world to the new. And you, my friend, are transferred with them. You are now assigned to the travelling post office, or PO, the absolute pinnacle of Victorian postal innovation. To the public, the PO is a miracle, a symbol of Britain's mastery over time and space. Newspapers print breathless articles about these post offices on wheels. They are depicted as gleaming carriages, palaces of order and ingenuity, attached to the fastest express trains. The articles describe a clean, well-lit interior where intelligent men, the cream of the postal service, sort letters with calm precision as the beautiful English countryside glides past their windows. It is a vision of progress at its most sublime, the power of the mighty steam locomotive combined with the intellectual rigour of the post office, working in perfect harmony. It is a moving monument to efficiency. You climb aboard, and the romantic illusion is immediately consumed by fire and noise. The PO is not a carriage, it is a long, narrow wooden box, vibrating like a plucked string. There is no calm, and there is certainly no clean. The first thing you notice is the soot. It is everywhere. The PO is usually positioned directly behind the locomotive's tender, which means it receives the full, unfiltered output of the engine's smokestack. A constant shower of black, greasy cinders and fine ash rains down on the roof and puffs in through the ventilation slits and any open window. It coats every surface with a gritty, black film. The air is thick with it. You breathe it in. You taste it on your tongue. Within an hour, your face, hands, and uniform already grimy from the sorting officer streaked with black. Remember the ink stains under your fingernails? Now they are joined by a thick, greasy deposit of coal dust. Then there is the motion. You thought the mail coach was bad? It was a gentle rocking horse, compared to this. The carriage sways and pitches violently on the tracks, which are often uneven. It's a constant, side-to-side, jarring motion that is utterly relentless. The entire carriage shudders and groans around you. You must learn to walk with a permanent sailor's gait, your legs braced, your body absorbing the endless shocks, and the noise is overwhelming. It is not just the clatter of the wheels on the rails, but the deafening roar of the locomotive just ahead, the hiss of its steam, the shriek of its whistle at every crossing. The walls of your wooden box seem to amplify the sound, trapping it inside with you. It's a constant, industrial scream. Inside this swaying, soot-filled, screaming box, you must work. The depot is fitted with sorting racks, pigeonholes and tables, just like the stationery office. But here, the pigeonholes seem to mock you, vibrating and dancing before your eyes. You have to sort letters by the dim, flickering light of oil lamp, scarce lighting being far too dangerous on a moving train. The lamps swing wildly with the motion of the carriage, casting shadows that leap and twist, making the already difficult-to-read handwriting almost indecipherable. Your eyes strain in the gloom, and the constant shaking gives you a low-grade headache that will last for your entire shift. The core of the depot's ingenuity is also its greatest danger, the mail-bag exchange apparatus. This was a system of nets and robotic-looking arms that allowed the train to drop off and pick up mail sacks from stations without ever stopping. To the public, it was a work of genius. For you, it is a moment of intense, focused terror. As the train approaches a station at 60 miles an hour, a bell rings. You must go to the open doorway, a gaping hole in the side of the carriage, and prepare the mail sack on its arm. The wind tears at you, a physical force trying to suck you out into the roaring darkness. You have seconds to make sure the bag is secure before the apparatus at the trackside smashes into it, hopefully catching it in its net. A moment's miscalculation, a loose rope, a sudden lurch of the train, could mean a lost mail sack, a sack for which you are responsible. Far worse, it could mean you are dragged out of the carriage along with it. Why this brutal, high-speed ordeal? The why is the insatiable hunger of Victorian commerce and industry. As the Industrial Revolution boomed, business could no longer wait a day for an order, a contract, or a bill of lading to arrive. The mail coach, at its 10 miles per hour, was suddenly archaic. Business demanded that a letter posted in London in the evening arrive in Manchester or Glasgow in time for the start of the business day. The travelling post office was the answer. It eliminated the wasted time a letter would spend just sitting in the back of a train. By sorting the mail en route, it could be ready for immediate delivery upon arrival. It was a system that effectively compressed time and space to serve the needs of the economy. The men who designed it were brilliant engineers, focused on a single problem: speed. The human cost, the exhaustion, the health effects of breathing coal dust, the sheer terror of the mail bag exchange was simply not a variable in their equation. You were not a person. You were a component in a high-speed distribution system. You stand there, swaying with the rhythm of the train, your hand automatically flicking letters into the correct slots. You've learned to do it by touch and instinct, your eyes half closed against the soot and the flickering light. You are a ghost in the machine, a grimy, exhausted operator at the very edge of human endurance, hurtling through the night. The glamour of progress is a story told by others. Your reality is the grit between your teeth and the ceaseless, screaming roar of the wheels on the track, carrying you ever onward toward the sleeping cities that expect their mail, without fail, by morning. Whether you arrive by rattling coach or by screaming, soot-choked train, your journey is far from over. In fact, the part of the job that defines you in the public eye is about to begin. You are a postman, a letter carrier, the final, crucial link in the chain. When people picture you now, they see a cheerful, brisk figure, a friendly face known to everyone on his route. They imagine you striding along a clean, respectable street, whistling a tune, tipping your hat to the ladies and patting the heads of smiling children. You are the bearer of glad tidings, a welcome guest at every door. Your daily walk is pictured as a form of healthy, pleasant exercise through a city of charming architectural variety. The iconic image of the postman is one of happy, reliable service, a daily constitutional with a purpose. Your red coat is a welcome splash of cholera in the neighborhood, a symbol of the comforting regularity of daily life. The reality begins with the weight. That leather satchel, which felt heavy when it was empty, is now a monster. It's loaded with 50, maybe 60 pounds of letters, newspapers and parcels. The strap cuts deep into your shoulder, a constant, nagging pain that you have to shift from side to side throughout the day. Your daily route is not a pleasant stroll. It is a grueling 20-mile forced march. And it's not through a pristine, charming city. It's through the treacherous, filth-strewn labyrinth of Victorian London. You start your route in the wealthier districts, and even here, the reality defies the illusion. The streets are paved with cobblestones, which are uneven, slippery when wet, and unforgiving on your feet and ankles. You have to be constantly vigilant for the primary hazard of any Victorian street: horses. The sheer volume of horse-drawn traffic carriages, omnibuses, delivery carts is staggering. And with thousands of horses comes their inevitable byproduct. The streets are caked in a layer of horse manure, a brown, foul-smelling sludge that in wet weather becomes a slurry that splashes up with every footstep, soiling the bottoms of your trousers. In dry weather, it turns to dust, which is kicked up by the wind and traffic, a fine, acrid powder that you breathe in. You learn to walk with your eyes down, not just to find your way, but to navigate the ever-present piles of dung. As your route takes you from the grand squares into the poorer, more densely packed neighborhoods, the conditions deteriorate rapidly. Here, the streets are often unpaved, turning to thick, clinging mud in the rain. There are no proper sewers. People throw their household waste, including the contents of their chamber pots, directly into the street or into the central gutter, known as a kennel. The stench is overpowering, a rich, complex perfume of human waste, rotting vegetables and damp, overcrowded tenements. You have to hop over streams of foul-smelling liquid and navigate around piles of garbage. Rats, bold as you please, scurry just at the edge of your vision. The social hazards are just as threatening as the physical ones. While your uniform commands respect in some quarters, in the rookeries and slums, it can make you a target. You are assumed to be carrying items of value, and a lone postman in a dark, narrow alleyway is a tempting mark for the desperate. You learn to be constantly aware of your surroundings, to read the faces of the people you pass, to know which pubs to walk past quickly and which alleys to avoid altogether. And then, there are the dogs. Stray, often starving dogs are everywhere, and a man in a uniform who approaches their territory is often seen as a threat. A dog bite is not just painful. In an age before rabies shots, it can be a death sentence. Why this appalling, dangerous slog? Why was the simple act of delivering a letter so fraught with peril and filth? The answer lies in the explosive, unregulated growth of the city. London had grown faster than its infrastructure could possibly keep up. The grand projects of the era, the new bridges, the railway stations are for commerce and for the wealthy. The basic necessities of life for the millions of poor crammed into the city, like sanitation and paved roads, were an afterthought. The city was a place of stark contrasts, of magnificent wealth existing right next to abject squalor. The post office, in its mission to provide universal service, had to traverse both worlds. The penny post was for everyone, which meant you, its agent, had to go everywhere. Your route was a daily cross-section of this social and sanitary nightmare. The public could live in their comfortable enclaves and pretend the filth and poverty didn't exist, but you had to walk through it. You were the thread that stitched the two halves of the city together. The grime on your boots and the weariness in your bones at the end of the day was the physical evidence of the city's deep, unacknowledged divisions. Your feet ache. It's a deep, burning ache that starts in your soles and radiates up your legs. Your boots, though sturdy, are rarely waterproof, and your socks are perpetually damp, either from rain or from sweat. Blisters are your constant companions. You shift the heavy bag again, the strap groaning in protest. You look at the next letter in your hand. The address is a court deep within a maze of tenement buildings, a place the sun rarely reaches. As you head into the narrow, dark opening, you pull the letter from its fellows and your thumb smudges against the little red circle of wax holding the flap closed, a tiny, elegant detail that feels absurdly out of place in this world of mud and misery. You pause for a moment in that dark alleyway, the stench of the slum thick in the air around you, to look at the letter in your hand. It's destined for someone in this wretched court, yet it bears all the hallmarks of coming from a world away. It's written on thick, creamy paper, and the back is sealed not with a lick of gum, but with a perfect circle of dark red sealing wax, impressed with the intricate design of a family crest. To the sender and the intended recipient, this seal is a mark of authenticity and high social standing. It is a little flourish of elegance, a tradition stretching back centuries. The wax seal conjures images of a quiet, wood-panelled study, a gentleman at his mahogany desk, carefully melting a stick of fragrant, colored wax over the flame of a candle. The act of sealing a letter is seen as a thoughtful, personal ritual. The seal itself is a beautiful object, a tiny sculpture in wax, that guarantees the privacy of the contents within. It smells, faintly, of beeswax and expensive perfume, a scent of luxury and refinement. But as you stand there, about to deliver this little piece of elegance, you know the hidden truth behind that perfect, glossy seal. You've seen the wax being made, and you know what goes into it. The reality is far from the perfumed, gentle image. You run your thumb over the seal. It's hard and brittle. That's because the primary ingredient in most common sealing wax is not the gentle beeswax of a country garden. It is shellac, a resin secreted by the female lac bug in the forests of India and Thailand. To harvest it, millions of these tiny insects are scraped off tree branches, and the resin is melted down and purified. So the foundation of this elegant European tradition is, in fact, imported insect secretion. To this shellac base, other resins like rosin, derived from pine trees, are added to make it suitably brittle. But it's the cholera that hides the most toxic secrets. That beautiful, deep crimson you see on the letter in your hand is not from some harmless berry dye. It is created by adding a generous amount of vermilion, a brilliant red pigment. And vermilion is ground mercuric sulfide. Mercury, a potent neurotoxin. The workers in the factories that produced this wax, who were constantly handling and inhaling the fine red dust, suffered from tremors, memory loss, and a host of other debilitating neurological conditions. The cheaper, but equally popular, red pigment was red lead, which, as the name suggests, is a lead oxide. The long-term effects of lead poisoning, developmental delays in children, organ damage, and cognitive decline were just beginning to be understood, but that didn't stop its widespread use in everything from paint to cosmetics to the very wax used to seal a friendly letter. Other colours had their own poisons. The fashionable bright green wax, known as Skeel's green, was made with copper arsenite. Arsenic. A notorious and deadly poison. It was famous for being used in everything from wallpaper to confectionery, and its use in sealing wax meant that anyone frequently handling it was absorbing small quantities of arsenic through their skin, and that lovely perfumed scent. It wasn't always from expensive oils. Cheaper waxes were often bulked out with chalk or plaster and scented with harsh, synthetic chemical compounds that could cause rashes and breathing difficulties. The entire process of making sealing wax was a toxic trade, and the elegant end product was a little disc of poison, carried in your bag. So why? Why create these beautiful, dangerous little objects when a simple adhesive would have worked just as well? The answer is a mixture of tradition, status, and a profound misunderstanding of the dangers. The use of a personal seal was a holdover from a time when it was a genuine security measure, a way for the recipient to know the letter hadn't been tampered with and that it truly came from the person who claimed to have sent. In the Victorian era, it became less about security and more about social signalling. Using sealing wax, especially coloured wax with a family crest, was a way to perform your social class. It showed you had the leisure and the money for such old-fashioned, non-essential rituals. It was a subtle, but clear way of saying, I am not of the common sort who just licks their envelopes. The toxicity was simply not a primary concern. The dangers of substances like lead and mercury were known in a vague sense, but the prevailing worldview was one of acceptance. These were the materials of industry and art. The risks were for the lower classes who worked in the factories, and the tiny amounts on a single letter were considered harmless. The idea of long-term, low-dose exposure was not yet part of the public or scientific consciousness. The immediate aesthetic and social benefits of the beautiful, toxic seal far outweighed the invisible, delayed risks. The beauty of the tradition blinded them to the poison it contained. You press the letter into the hand of the woman who answers the door in the dim, foul-smelling tenement. She takes it, her eyes widening at the sight of the fancy crest on the wax. For a moment, this little red disc connects her dreary world to one of a distant, unimaginable glamour. You have delivered the message, a message that carries not just the sender's words, but also a tiny, potent speck of the era's hidden chemistry. You turn and leave the courtyard, your bag feeling slightly lighter, but you are still being watched, not just by the wary inhabitants of the slum, but by the invisible eyes of the post office itself, an organization obsessed not just with the poisons in its materials but with the potential poison in the hearts of its men. As you continue on your long, wearying route, leaving the dark courtyard behind, you can't shake a certain feeling. It's a prickling sensation on the back of your neck, a sense of being perpetually observed. It is not the gaze of a potential thief in an alley, nor the curious stare of a child. It is the invisible, all-seeing eye of your employer, the General Post Office. To the public, the postman is a model of integrity. You are entrusted with their most private communications and their money. This trust, they believe, is born from the inherent good character of the men selected for the job. The post office is seen as a benevolent, if strict, paternal employer who cultivates loyalty through fair treatment and the prestige of the uniform. They imagine a bond of mutual respect between the postman and his superiors, a team united in the noble cause of public service. The reality, as you know all too well, is a culture of profound and pervasive mistrust. The GPO does not run on loyalty, it runs on fear. Your life, both on and off duty, is governed by a book of rules so thick and detailed it could rival the Bible. There are regulations for the precise angle of your hat, the acceptable length of your sideburns, and the number of seconds you are permitted to linger in conversation at a doorway. You are forbidden from entering a public house while in uniform, a rule that is almost torturous on a hot, dusty summer's day. You are forbidden from carrying any personal letters of your own in your mailbag, lest you be tempted to use the service for free. You must walk at a regulation pace 3 miles per hour, and any deviation, either too fast or too slow, can be noted and used against you. And how are these rules enforced? Through a system of surveillance that would make a spy agency proud. Your direct supervisors, the overseers, are not your friendly mentors, they are your wardens. They perform surprise inspections along your route, hiding in doorways or watching from upper-story windows to time your progress between 2 points. They might trail you for several blocks, noting every tiny infraction. But the official surveillance is only half of it. The GPO has also cultivated a network of unofficial spies. They use confidential informant shopkeepers, publicans, even ordinary citizens on your route who are encouraged to report any misconduct. A postman seen accepting a Christmas tip too eagerly. A postman who seems a little too friendly with a household's maid. A postman who stops to chat with a friend for a minute too long. All of it can be reported back to the central office. This culture of suspicion breeds a kind of paranoia. You start to see a potential informant in every face. The friendly butcher who offers you a slice of sausage might be testing your adherence to the rule against accepting treats. The woman who complains about her mail being late might be filing a formal demerit against your record. You are living in a state of constant, low-level anxiety. Your fellow postmen are not necessarily your comrades, they could be rivals, willing to report your mistakes to get a slight advantage, or a better route. The system is designed to keep you isolated and on edge. The most feared arm of this internal police state is the Post Office Investigation Department. These are the detectives of the GPO, the secret office. If a letter containing money is reported missing from your route, they descend. They will search your home, turning your small room upside down. They will interrogate your neighbors, your landlord, your family. They employ clever, cruel tricks. One common tactic is the test letter. They will prepare a letter with a marked coin or banknote inside, addressed to a fictitious person on your route. They will then have an agent post it in a way that ensures it ends up in your bag. If the letter is not returned to the dead letter office at the end of the day, they will assume you have stolen it. You will be arrested, and your career will be over. The burden of proof is on you to demonstrate your innocence, an almost impossible task against the word of the GPO's investigators. Why this oppressive, almost tyrannical system of control? The logic is rooted in the immense value and vulnerability of the mail. With the explosion of commerce and the introduction of postal orders and money orders, the mail was no longer just gossip and news, it was a river of cash, checks, and valuable goods. The temptation for a poorly paid man to supplement his income was enormous. The GPO's leaders believed that human nature was inherently weak and that virtue could not be trusted. The only way to guarantee the integrity of the mail was through a system of absolute discipline and total surveillance. It was a military model applied to a civilian workforce. They believed that fear was a more reliable motivator than loyalty. Your every action was scrutinized, because they started from the assumption that you were a potential criminal, and that only the constant threat of discovery and ruin kept you honest. The trust the public had in you was not, in the eyes of the GPO, a reflection of your character, but a testament to the effectiveness of their iron-fisted system. You adjust the heavy satchel on your shoulder and force yourself to walk at the prescribed pace, your eyes forward. You pass a public house, the sound of laughter and the smell of ale wafting out. You don't even glance at it. You are a good postman, not because you are good, but because you are afraid. You are a tiny cog in a vast, impersonal machine, and the machine has no tolerance for faulty parts. Any letter that cannot be delivered, whether due to a fictitious address on a test letter or a simple illegible scrawl, must be taken back to the office. There it will enter a strange, quiet purgatory, a place where the system admits its own rare defeat. At the end of your exhausting 20-mile walk, your feet burning and your shoulder screaming from the weight of the satchel, You return to the district office. Your work is still not done. The few remaining letters in your bag, the ones that could not be delivered for one reason or another, an illegible address, a recipient who was moved away, or perhaps one of those dreaded test letters, must be handed over. These letters now begin a new journey, not to a person, but to a place. They are sent to the central dead letter office. To the public, if they ever think of it at all, the dead letter office sounds like a rather sad but tidy administrative department. They might picture a small, quiet office where a few clerks with excellent handwriting neatly catalogue and file away the undeliverable mail. It's a place of finality, the end of the line, but an orderly one. The name itself, Dead Letter Office, has a certain Gothic romance to it, a melancholic poetry. It's the place where forgotten stories go to rest, a library of lost connections. They might imagine it as a silent, slightly dusty archive, a place of quiet contemplation over the poignant mysteries of miscommunication. Your brief time assigned to duty inside the Dead Letter Office revealed a very different and far more visceral reality. You push through a door and step into a room that smells unlike any other in the postal system. It's not the sharp scent of fresh ink or the grime of the sorting hall. It's a thick, musty, cloying smell. It is the smell of slow decay. The air is heavy with the scent of old, damp paper, mildew, and the faint, ghostly aromas of the thousands of lives contained in the letters stacked to the ceiling. But there is another smell, too, the smell of things that were never meant to be sent through the post. You see, it isn't just letters that end up here. It's undeliverable parcels. And the contents of these parcels, after weeks or months of travel and storage in damp mailbags and warehouses, are often in a state of advanced decomposition. The clerk at a nearby table carefully opens a small, stained box. You see him recoil slightly. From where you stand, you can smell it, the putrid, sickly sweet stench of rotting meat. Someone tried to send a pork pie to a relative. Another parcel might contain what was once a lovely cake, now a landscape of green and black fur. Jars of jam and preserves, shattered in transit, leak a sticky, fermented ooze that attracts flies, but the truly stomach-turning discoveries are the biological ones. People attempted to mail anything and everything. Snakes, lizards, and other small animals, sent as curiosities or gifts, frequently died en route. The clerks have found boxes containing dead birds, decomposing fish, and once, famously, a human head, sent for medical study, that was improperly addressed. The Dead Letter Office is not a quiet library. It is a morgue for misguided parcels, a museum of rot. Even the letters themselves offer up strange and unsettling secrets. Clerks are tasked with carefully opening the dead letters to search for any clue, any return address, that might allow them to be sent back to the sender. In doing so, they become unwilling confessors to the nation's secrets. They read the last, desperate pleas of lovers, the tear-stained farewells of suicide notes that were never delivered. They find letters full of blackmail, threats, and elaborate criminal plans, and they find objects tucked inside the letters, locks of hair, pressed flowers now crumbled to dust, photographs of forgotten faces, and, most commonly, money. Coins, banknotes, and postal orders, tucked into letters by people who trusted the post but couldn't write a clear address. All of this is meticulously recorded. The clerks here are not quiet archivists. They are archaeologists of failure, sifting through the sad, strange, and sometimes disgusting detritus of a million broken connections. So why did this place exist in such a bizarre form? Why was it filled with such macabre and pathetic objects? It was a direct consequence of the post office's own success. By making the post so cheap and accessible, it had been adopted by every class of society. But literacy was far from universal. Many people who could now afford to send a letter still struggled to write a clear address. They would write to my son to me who works at the docks in London. An impossible task for you or any postman to fulfill. The sender, often living in poverty, would have no other way of contacting their loved one, so they would take a chance, tucking their precious few shillings into the envelope and hoping for a miracle. The parcels full of rotting food and dead animals were a testament to a similar naivety. In an age before refrigerated transport was common, people simply didn't understand the logistics of time and distance. They packed a piece of home, a tangible taste of their love, and sent it off, not realizing they were simply mailing a future biohazard. The Dead Letter Office was the place where the grand, efficient system of the depot collided with the messy, unpredictable, and often tragic reality of human life. It was a necessary, if unpleasant, component for tidying up the failures that the system itself helped to create. You hand over your small bundle of undeliverable mail, glad that you are only a visitor to this strange department. You can still smell the faint, sweet scent of decay as you turn to leave. Your day is nearly done, but the memory of this place, this quiet repository of lost hopes and rotting pies, lingers. It is a reminder that for every connection made, another is broken, lost somewhere in the vast, impersonal machinery of the mail. And as the year draws to a close, you know that the trickle of mail you see now is about to become a biblical flood. The days are growing shorter and colder. A festive spirit begins to fill the air in the city's wealthiest streets. Shop windows are decorated with holly and ribbons, and the scent of roasting chestnuts hangs in the air. For the public, Christmas is a time of joy, family, and connection. And central to this connection is the relatively new and wildly popular tradition of the Christmas card. They picture a delightful flurry of festive greetings, little works of art depicting robins on snowy branches, cherubic children, and heartwarming nativity scenes. Sending and receiving these cards is a cherished ritual, a way to reinforce bonds of friendship and family across the miles. They imagine you, the postman, as a kind of Father Christmas in a red coat, your satchel magically overflowing with colourful squares of happiness. You are the cheerful agent of this seasonal goodwill, delivering smiles to every doorstep. You, my friend, experience the Christmas rush not as a flurry, but as an avalanche, a crushing, soul-destroying deluge of paper that threatens to bury you and the entire postal system alive. The charming tradition of the Christmas card is, for you, a waking nightmare. The mail volume doesn't just increase, it multiplies by a factor of 5, 10, even 20 in the week leading up to Christmas Day. The sorting office, already a chaotic, roaring hell, becomes something worse. Every square inch of the building is filled with mountains of mail. Temporary tables are set up in hallways, in courtyards, anywhere a man can stand. The roar of the stamping becomes a continuous, maddening thunder that never ceases, day or night. The sheer physical labor is staggering. You are required to work 16, 18, sometimes even 20-hour days. Sleep becomes a snatched luxury, an hour here or there on a pile of empty mail sacks in a cold corner of the office, before a foreman shakes you awake to start another shift. Your hands, already stained with ink, become raw and cracked from handling the millions of sharp-edged cards and envelopes. The paper cuts are constant, stinging with a fresh intensity as the ink and grime work their way into the open wounds. The air, thick with paper dust, becomes almost unbreathable. Your postman's sore throat graduates to a hacking, painful cough that racks your entire body. And the cards themselves, those little messengers of joy, become objects of contempt. After you've looked at the 10,000th identical picture of a rosy-cheeked child on a sled, all charm evaporates. They cease to be individual greetings and merge into a single, monstrous entity, the pile. Your job is to conquer the pile. You are no longer sorting by street or name, you are just feeding the beast, a human machine fighting against a tide of paper. The festive red and green of the cards blur into a nauseating swirl of colour before your exhausted eyes. Out on your route, the misery intensifies. Your satchel, normally 60 pounds, now weighs 80 or 90. It is a physical agony to even lift it. The bag is so full that you have to make multiple trips back to the district office to reload, making your 20-mile route stretch to 30 or more. And this all happens in the worst weather of the year. You trudge through snow, sleet, and freezing rain, the dampness seeping into your bones. Your feet are perpetually numb with cold, and the risk of slipping on icy cobblestones and injuring yourself is constant. The public's expectation of cheer is a cruel joke. People open their doors, flushed with warmth and holiday spirit from their firesides, and expect you to share in their delight. They don't see the dark circles under your eyes, the tremor of exhaustion in your hands, or the deep, soul-crushing weariness that has settled over you. You are a ghost at their feast, a machine for delivering joy that feels none itself. Why this annual ritual of torture? Why was a pleasant tradition allowed to become a public health crisis for postal workers? It was a perfect storm of Victorian commercialism and technological unpreparedness. The Christmas card was one of the first truly mass-produced consumer novelties. New color printing technologies made them cheap to produce, and the penny post made them cheap to send. It was a craze that exploded with a speed the Poe could never have anticipated. They were organizationally and philosophically incapable of simply saying no or limiting the service. The post office's entire identity was built on the promise that it could deliver anything, at any time. To admit defeat, even to the festive avalanche, was unthinkable. So instead of investing in better facilities or safer working practices, they simply demanded more from their human machinery. They hired temporary workers, often desperate men with no training, and simply pushed their permanent staff to the absolute breaking point. The health, and sometimes the lives, of the postmen were the silent subsidy that made the nation's Christmas cheer possible. The entire glittering edifice of the Victorian Christmas card tradition was built on a foundation of your exhaustion. You finally reached the last door on your route on Christmas Eve. It's late. The sky is dark. You can hear singing from inside. You push the last handful of cards through the letterbox. Your bag is finally, blessedly empty. You turn away, every muscle in your body screaming in protest. You have delivered the nation's happiness. Your own reward is the prospect of a few hours of deep, dreamless sleep before the whole process begins again with the mountains of mail arriving on Boxing Day. As you trudge back to the office, you pass a group of women, their fingers flying as they sort mail at a temporary outdoor table under the dim glow of a gas lamp, a recent and controversial addition to your world. In the frantic, desperate push to manage the Christmas avalanche and the ever-growing volumes of mail, the post office was forced to consider a radical solution: hiring women. And so, as you pass the temporary sorting station, you see them, a group of women, their faces pinched with cold, their fingers moving with a startling quickness as they sort the endless river of cards and letters. To the progressive thinkers and newspaper editors of the day, this is a moment of glorious social advancement. They write glowing articles about the post office's enlightened policy. They praise the depot for opening up a new avenue of respectable employment for the weaker sex. They paint a picture of women being liberated from the drudgery of domestic service and given a chance to participate in the great work of the nation. The image presented is one of opportunity and equality, of women taking their rightful place in the modern workforce. They are seen as diligent, conscientious, and particularly well suited for the delicate, detailed work of sorting mail. Their presence is heralded as a civilizing influence on the rough, all-male environment of the postal service. But you, from your vantage point within the system, can see the stark reality behind this beautiful illusion of progress. You see that these women are not being treated as equals, they are being used as a source of cheap, exploitable labor. The first and most glaring injustice is their pay. For performing the exact same sorting duties as a man, a woman is paid significantly less, often only half or two-thirds of the male wage. The official justification for this is that women are not expected to be the primary breadwinners for a family, a convenient fiction that ignores the many women who are widowed, unmarried, or of husbands who are unable to work. The simple truth is that they are cheaper, and in a system obsessed with cutting costs, that is their primary appeal. You notice their working conditions. They are often relegated to the worst lit, most poorly ventilated corners of the sorting office. In this case, they are outside, exposed to the biting winter wind, with only the inadequate heat of a nearby brazier to keep their fingers from going completely numb. They are also subject to a stricter, more paternalistic set of rules than the men. Their breaks are shorter, their supervisors watch them more closely, and any perceived breach of decorum, laughing too loudly, a hint of makeup, an unchaperoned conversation with a male colleague can be grounds for immediate dismissal. They are trapped in a paradox. They are expected to do a man's work, but to behave at all times with a delicate, feminine propriety that is almost impossible to maintain in the chaotic, industrial environment of the office. The supposed delicate nature of the work is another myth. The idea that women's nimble fingers are uniquely suited to sorting letters is a romantic notion that masks the brutal reality of the job. Their fingers, just like yours, get covered in ink, sliced by paper cuts, and stiffen with cold. They breathe the same paper dust and coal soot, and they are often assigned the most monotonous, repetitive tasks, like facing the male mind-numbing job of turning every letter to face the same way for hours on end, a task that is believed to require less intelligence than the more complex sorting by district. The work is not delicate, it is grueling, and it breaks their bodies just as it breaks the men's, only they are paid less for the privilege. Why this carefully constructed facade of progress? Why celebrate the hiring of women while simultaneously embedding such deep inequality into the system? The answer lies in the Victorian obsession with maintaining social order and gender roles, even in the face of economic necessity. The post office needed more workers to handle the mail, and women were the most obvious, untapped labour pool. But the idea of women working alongside men, earning equal wages and competing for the same positions was deeply threatening to the patriarchal structure of society, so a compromise was struck. Women would be allowed to work, but only in a carefully controlled, subordinate role. The narrative of their nimble fingers and civilizing influence was created to make this economic decision socially palatable. It framed the exploitation as a natural extension of women's domestic virtues, rather than what it was, a calculated business decision to get the most work for the least amount of money. They were not pioneers of equality, they were a new class of cheap cogs for the ever-expanding postal machine. You give a brief, weary nod to the women as you pass, Some of them look back, their faces impassive, their fingers never stopping their frantic, rhythmic dance. There is a gulf between you. You are both trapped in the same system, but you occupy different, unequal rungs on its ladder. You are both exhausted, both underpaid, both caked in the grime of the mail. But your shared misery does not necessarily create solidarity. The system is designed to pit you against each other. The presence of these women, willing to work for less, puts a downward pressure on your own wages and makes you more easily replaceable. The beautiful story of progress is a lie. The truth is a more complicated tale of necessity, prejudice, and the relentless, pragmatic cruelty of the postal service, a cruelty that could push any worker, male or female, to a point of quiet, desperate temptation. You finally make it back to the relative quiet of the locker room, your long day at its end. You sink onto a hard wooden bench, the exhaustion so profound it feels like a physical illness. As you unlace your worn-out boots, you overhear two overseers talking in low, serious tones. Another man has been caught. A letter carrier from a neighbouring district, arrested for theft. You see the familiar shake of their heads, the grim, self-satisfied look that says the system has worked, that another piece of human weakness has been rooted out and punished. In the public narrative, and certainly in the righteous proclamations of the GPO, a postman who steals is the ultimate villain. He is a traitor, a wolf in sheep's clothing who has betrayed a sacred public trust. He is seen as a man of profound moral failings, driven by pure greed and a criminal nature. The newspapers report these cases with a tone of shocked indignation. The postman is supposed to be the epitome of honesty. The idea that one of you could be a common thief is a deeply unsettling thought, a crack in the very foundation of the public's faith in the system. The punishment is swift and severe dismissal, public disgrace, and often a lengthy prison sentence or even transportation to Australia. He is made an example of, a warning to all others. But you, sitting here in the bone-deep weariness of your own life, you understand the secret story. You know that it is rarely a simple case of a bad man driven by greed. More often, it is a story of quiet, gnawing desperation. You think of your own wages. They are just enough to live on, but only just. There is no room for error, no cushion for emergencies. A week of sickness without pay, a sudden illness in the family, a rise in the rent for your small room. Any of these common misfortunes could push you over the edge from simple poverty into utter destitution. You look down at your own hands. The ink stains a permanent part of your skin. Remember the feel of the mail. The thousands of letters you handle every day. You know that some of them feel different. There's a telltale stiffness, a slight bulge that suggests a banknote tucked inside. Or the small, hard lump of a coin. The temptation isn't a grand, cinematic haste. It's a small, pathetic, and intensely human moment of weakness. It happens in a dark hallway, or a deserted stretch of road. It's the thought that one small letter, just one, out of the thousands you carry, would never be missed. The sender probably wrote the address poorly anyway. The recipient might not even be expecting it. The rationalizations begin to build, fueled by the gnawing ache in your stomach or the thought of a sick child at home with no money for medicine. The crime itself is pathetically simple. A quick tear of an envelope flap, a finger slipped inside. The most common method is called predation. A postman would slightly tear the corner of multiple envelopes, a tiny rip that could be blamed on the machinery, and sift out any coins inside, which would then fall to the bottom of his mailbag. He would arrive at the end of his shift with a handful of loose coins, claiming they must have fallen from damaged letters. You know the men who get caught. They aren't hardened criminals. They are often the ones who are just like you, overworked, underpaid, and exhausted. It's the man whose wife has consumption and needs expensive treatments. It's the man who has fallen into debt with a loan shark after a bad week. It's the man whose uniform is so threadbare he needs to buy a new one to avoid being disciplined, but can't afford it. The act of stealing is not a leap into a life of crime. It is a desperate, clumsy attempt to stay afloat for one more week. It is a symptom of the immense pressure the system places upon you. Remember that all-pervasive surveillance we talked about? The test letters with their marked coins. The system is designed with the expectation that you will break. So why was the punishment so severe and the narrative of pure evil so absolute? Because the GPO could not, under any circumstances, admit to the systemic flaws that created the problem. They could not acknowledge that their low wages and punishing working conditions were a primary driver of theft. To do so would be to admit failure. It was far easier and more effective to demonize the individual. By portraying the thief, as a uniquely immoral monster, they reinforced the idea that the system itself was pure and just. The postman's public disgrace served a dual purpose. It terrified other workers into honesty, and it reassured the public that any problems were due to isolated bad apples, not a rotten barrel. The Poe's narrative of trust was a performance, and these public shamings were a crucial part of the show. The man sent to prison was a sacrifice made to maintain the illusion of the system's infallibility. You finally manage to pull off your boots, and the relief is immense. You wiggle your aching toes. You have resisted the temptation today. The fear of the secret office, the thought of public ruin, was stronger than the desperation, but the quiet understanding of how easily one could fall remains. It's a secret knowledge shared by all the men who wear the uniform. You are all walking a fine line, every single day. The ink on your hands feels like a permanent mark of your labor, but it's also a constant reminder of the river of invisible money that flows through your fingers, a river you must never, ever taste, no matter how thirsty you become. The physical toll of the job is obvious in your aching body, but you are also aware of a more insidious ailment, a constant rasp in your throat that comes from the very air you breathe. You stand up from the bench, every joint protesting, and head for the wash basin to splash some cold water on your face. As you clear your throat, you feel it. That familiar, raw, scraping sensation. It's the postman's sore throat, a condition so common it has been given your profession's name. It's a constant companion, a low-grade inflammation that sometimes flares up into a hacking, phlegm-filled cough that can last for weeks. To the public, a postman's health is generally considered robust. All that walking in the fresh air must be good for you, they think. They imagine you with rosy cheeks and a hearty constitution, a picture of rude health cultivated by an active outdoor life. A cough is just a cough, a minor inconvenience of the winter season. The reality is that your lungs and throat are under constant siege from the environment your job forces you to inhabit. It begins in the sorting office. Remember that thick, dusty air? The fine paper fibres and aerosolized ink particles? You breathe that in for hours every morning. It's an industrial irritant that coats the delicate membranes of your respiratory system, causing chronic inflammation. Then you board the travelling post office, and the assault intensifies. You spend your shift in a swaying box filled with a concentrated plume of coal soot and ash from the locomotive. These tiny, greasy particles work their way deep into your lungs, causing not just irritation, but long-term damage. Finally, you begin your delivery route. The fresh air of the city is a chemical soup. It is thick with the smoke from tens of thousands of coal fires, pouring from every chimney. This creates the infamous London pea superfogs, which are not just water vapor but a thick, yellow-brown smog of sulfur dioxide and particulate matter. The fog is so dense it stings the eyes and makes breathing feel like sipping syrup. You spend your entire day walking through it, inhaling it. And layered within that smog is the fine, acrid dust from the dried horse manure that coats the streets. Your lungs are a filter for the city's filth, and the postman's sore throat is the physical manifestation of your body losing the battle. It is not just a sore throat, it is a chronic industrial disease. When the cough becomes unbearable, you must seek a remedy. But in this era, a visit to a qualified doctor is an expense you can ill afford. Instead, you turn to the world of patent medicines and popular quack remedies. The newspapers are filled with advertisements for miraculous cures. You see ads for cherry pectoral, balsam of horehound, or lung syrup. They promise instant relief with their secret, often herbal formulas. To the desperate sufferer, these tonics seem like a godsend. They are affordable, readily available from any chemist, and their marketing speaks directly to your misery, promising to soothe your cough and heal your lungs. The bottles are often beautifully designed. The names sound scientific and reassuring. But you, after having tried a few, know the secret behind their temporary relief. You take a swig of a popular cough syrup, and for a short while, your throat does feel better, and your hacking cough subsides. This isn't because of any miracle herb. It's because the active ingredients in the vast majority of these patent medicines are potent narcotics. The soothing syrup that stops your cough is likely a mixture of alcohol and opium, often in the form of laudanum or morphine. Some of the calming remedies for throat inflammation contain cannabis. And many of the syrups designed to be expectorants to clear the lungs contain dangerous substances like chloroform or tartaremetic, a toxic antimony compound that works by making you feel nauseous. You are not curing the underlying inflammation. You are simply drugging yourself into not feeling the symptoms. The temporary relief comes at the cost of potential addiction and long-term harm from the dangerous, unregulated ingredients. Why was this landscape of toxic air and narcotic cures the norm? The connection between environment and health was only just beginning to be understood. The prevailing miasma theory held that disease was caused by bad smells, not by invisible germs or particles. While the stench of the city was unpleasant, the specific danger of inhaling coal dust or paper fibres was not widely recognized by the medical establishment or the public. The GPO, as your employer, certainly had no incentive to investigate the long-term health effects of the working conditions they created. It was far cheaper to let you suffer and dose yourself with quack remedies. The patent medicine industry thrived in this vacuum of scientific knowledge and lack of regulation. Anyone could bottle a mixture of cheap alcohol and opiates, slap a fancy label on it, and sell it as a miracle cure. The government was reluctant to regulate this hugely profitable industry. Your sore throat was not just your problem, it was a small but lucrative cog in the economy of illness. You swallow, the raw feeling in your throat returning as the effects of your morning dose wear off. You are caught in a trap. The job that provides your meager living is also slowly destroying your health from the inside out. And the only accessible cures are poisons masquerading as medicine. The air you breathe is the source of your ailment, an invisible enemy you can't fight. This very air, thick with the particles of the city, also carries the paper that binds the nation together, paper that sometimes has to travel much further than the next town over, crossing vast oceans and carrying with it the very essence of a global enterprise. Your work is not confined to the shores of Britain. The General Post Office is the heart of a global network, the circulatory system for the vast and sprawling British Empire. Sometimes your duties take you not to a sorting office or a train station, but down to the immense, chaotic docks of London. Here, the mail is not loaded into coaches, but swung in huge, netted sacks into the dark holds of mail ships. To the readers of the Illustrated London News, this is a scene of imperial majesty. They see magnificent steamships and tall-masted clippers, their flags snapping in the breeze. They imagine the mail being stored in clean, secure lockers, a precious cargo representing the power and administrative genius of the empire. The mail is the thread that stitches a vast global tapestry together, carrying orders to governors in India, business contracts to merchants in Hong Kong, and letters from mothers to their sons in the army in Africa. The mail ship is a vessel of destiny, a clean, efficient conveyor of British authority and culture to the furthest corners of the earth. You, however, have been down in the hold of one of these ships, and you know the damp, musty truth. You follow the mail sacks as they are lowered into the ship's belly. The illusion of a clean, secure locker evaporates the moment you descend the ladder. The mail is often just one type of cargo among many. It is crammed into a space next to barrels of salted fish, crates of machinery, and sacks of raw wool. The air in the hold is thick and stagnant, a potent cocktail of smells. The dominant scent is a pervasive, wet and slightly sweet smell of dampness and mildew. It's the smell of a space that is never truly dry, where the cold, wet reality of the ocean seeps into everything. Woven into this is the smell of bilge water, a foul, oily stench from the very bottom of the ship. And mixed with that is the strong, animal smell of the raw wool, the fishy tang from the barrels, and the faint, but sharp smell of rat droppings. The mail sacks themselves, made of coarse canvas, act like sponges in this environment. They soak up the moisture and the smells of the hold. A letter beginning its journey on clean, crisp paper will, after 6 weeks at sea, arrive at its destination feeling limp and smelling faintly of mildew and bilge. This is the source of that specific old paper smell you sometimes encounter in archives. It is often the ghost of a long sea voyage. And you are not alone down here. The hold is teeming with life. Rats are a constant presence, scurrying in the darkness between the crays. They gnaw at everything, including the tough canvas of the mail sacks. It's not uncommon for a sack to be opened in Calcutta or Sydney to find that a corner of the mail within has been shredded to make a rat's nest. Cockroaches and other insects also thrive in the dark, damp environment, scuttling over the sacks and sometimes finding their way inside. The journey itself is a trial. The mail is at the mercy of the sea. In a storm, the ship pitches and rolls, and the cargo can shift violently. Sacks can be crushed under heavier crates. If the ship takes on water, the mail in the lower parts of the hold can be completely saturated, turning the letters into a solid, pulpy mass of papier. The ink runs, the words blur, and the messages are lost forever. The grand, orderly procession of imperial command is in reality a chaotic, hazardous gamble, subject to rot, rodents, and the immense, indifferent power of the ocean. So why this grimy, precarious method for holding an empire together? Why wasn't this vital cargo treated with more care? The answer is one of sheer scale and pragmatism. The volume of mail required to administer an empire official dispatches, military orders, commercial documents, personal letters was colossal. There was simply no way to give it all special, privileged treatment. Mail had to travel on the same ships as every other commodity, because speed and cost were paramount. A mail contract was a lucrative prize for a shipping line, but it came with the same ruthless penalty clauses as the mail coach contracts. The ships had to sail on time, regardless of the weather, and get to their destination as quickly as possible. The condition of the mail upon arrival was a secondary concern to the speed of its arrival. The colonial administrator waiting for his orders didn't care if the paper was a bit damp. He just needed the orders. The empire wasn't run on pristine documents stored in mahogany boxes. It was run on musty, bilge-scented paper that had survived a rat-infested journey across the world. The grand project of empire, which looked so magnificent on maps and in speeches, was, at its most fundamental level, held together by mundane, grubby and often smelly paperwork. You watch the last sack disappear into the dark, damp more of the ship. You have played your small part, moving the paper from one part of the machine to the next. You have handled letters destined for a London slum, and letters destined for a governor's palace in Bombay. To you, it is all just mail, all just weight in your bag. The system doesn't care about the contents, only the conveyance. You turn your back on the docks and the sea, and begin the long walk back towards the familiar streets of the city. Your career is measured in these journeys, in footsteps, in the weight on your shoulder and the ink on your hands, and you begin to wonder what it will all amount to in the end. When your own journey is finally over, years pass. The seasons turn, each one marked by the familiar rhythm of your work. The exhausting avalanche of Christmas, the muddy slog of spring, the hot, dusty roots of summer, the damp chill of autumn. Your body has kept a faithful record of this service. The ink stains on your hands are no longer just on the surface. They feel as if they have seeped into your very bones. The constant weight of the satchel has given you a permanent stoop, a slight, forward-leaning posture that you maintain even when you are not carrying the bag. Your feet are a road map of old blisters and calluses, and the postman's sore throat has become a permanent feature of your voice, a low, gravelly rasp. In the public's imagination, the veteran postman is a figure of gentle, well-earned respectability. He is the grand old man of the neighbourhood, a local institution. They picture him enjoying a peaceful and dignified retirement, honoured by the post office for his decades of faithful service. He is presented with a handsome gold watch in a formal ceremony, a symbol of the valuable time he has given. His pension, they assume, is a generous one, allowing him to live out his days in a comfortable cottage with a small garden, content in the knowledge that he has served his queen and country well. He is the embodiment of the Victorian ideal of a life of hard work leading to a just and comfortable reward. The reality of your final years of service, and the retirement that follows, is a much quieter and more precarious affair. The post office does not reward its aging workers with lighter duties. You are expected to maintain the same pace, carry the same weight, and walk the same 20-mile route as a man 30 years your junior. There is no concession to age. In fact, you feel the overseer's eyes on you more than ever, watching for any sign of slowing down, any weakness that might suggest you are no longer up to the job. You push your aching body to its limits every day, a desperate effort to remain a functional part of the machine. The fear of dismissal, which haunted you as a young man, returns with a new, more terrifying intensity. To be dismissed now, so close to the end, would be to lose everything. And then, the day comes. You receive a small, formal letter informing you that your service is at an end. There is no grand ceremony. There is no gold watch. There is simply a final accounting of your service and the calculation of your pension. The Superannuation Act of 1859 had indeed established a pension scheme for civil servants, a revolutionary idea at the time. To the outside world, this sounds wonderfully progressive. But the reality of the sum is a shock. The pension is calculated on a fraction of your final salary, which was never large to begin with. What you are left with is a tiny, almost insulting pittance. It is not enough to live on in any comfort. It is just barely enough to keep you from starving, provided you live with extreme frugality. Your retirement is not a peaceful existence in a country cottage. It is a move to an even smaller, cheaper room than the one you lived in during your working life. It is a daily struggle to make your meagre allowance stretch. The satisfaction of a life's work well done is overshadowed by the constant, low-level anxiety about money. You are no longer part of the great machinery of the post. You are simply an old man in a small room, with a body that aches with the memory of his labour. The world you helped to connect has moved on, its pace ever quickening, and it has no time for its worn-out parts. Why this stark, ungenerous end to a lifetime of loyalty? The answer is one of cold, hard economics, dressed up in the language of morality. The pension scheme was a landmark piece of social policy, but it was designed primarily to benefit the state, not the worker. Its main purpose was to create a stable, career-long workforce and to give the GPO a powerful tool threat of withholding the pension to enforce discipline. The amount was kept deliberately low. The Victorian mindset, even in its most progressive form, was deeply suspicious of what it saw as handouts. A generous pension, it was argued, would discourage thrift and self-reliance during a man's working years. The small sum you receive is seen as a supplement, not a living wage. You were expected to have saved for your own retirement. This, of course, was an impossibility for a man on a postman's wages, who was barely able to support himself and his family day to day. The system was designed to take your entire working life, and in return, give you just enough to prevent you from becoming a complete burden on the parish in your old age. Your reward for a lifetime of service was to be made a non-burden. You sit by the window of your small room, watching the new, younger postman walk down the street. He has the same determined stride you once had, the same heavy bag on his shoulder. You see the flash of his scarlet coat, a cholera that now seems to belong to a different life. You have nothing to show for your decades of work, but the aches in your joints and the rasp in your throat. You were the invisible, essential cog that made the whole glorious enterprise possible. You wore the proud uniform, you sorted the endless mail, you braved the filthy streets and the dangerous journeys. You were the human price paid for every letter delivered, every connection made, every order of empire that reached its destination. And now, you are simply forgotten. The light begins to fade and the familiar London fog, thick with coal smoke and secrets, begins to blur the edges of the world outside your window. The sounds of the city become softer, more distant. The clatter of hooves, the cries of street vendors, the rumble of carts, all of it begins to melt away into a gentle, continuous hum. Your own long day, a day that has lasted a lifetime, is finally drawing to its quiet close. You can feel the weariness settling in, a deep and final exhaustion, not just in your bones, but in your very spirit. There is a strange peace in this final quietness. The frantic, relentless ticking of the post office clock, which has governed your every waking moment for so long, has at last fallen silent for you. There are no more routes to walk, no more mountains of mail to sort, no more supervisor's eyes to avoid. The immense weight of the satchel is finally lifted from your shoulder, a ghost of a pressure that has taken years to fade. All the secrets you carried, all the urgent messages and forgotten promises contained in a million folded pieces of paper, are no longer your burden to bear. They belong to another generation of men now, men who will stain their own hands with ink and wear down their own bodies in service of the mail. You close your eyes, and the images of your life drift by like smoke. The roaring, dusty chaos of the sorting hall. The bone-jarring rattle of the mail coach on a frozen road. The greasy film of soot in the travelling post office. The vile, sweet smell of the dead letter office. The crushing weight of the Christmas rush. The faces of people at their doors, some smiling, some angry, some indifferent. It all seems like a dream now, a story that happened to someone else. You are just a thread in a vast and intricate tapestry, a thread that has now reached its end, and as you let go, as you allow yourself to sink into the deep comfort of your bed, you can finally rest. The letter has been delivered. The journey is over. End of script. Sweet dreams.